Ever feel like you're kind of playing a game, but not sure you know all the rules?
Ooh, I know that feeling.
Well, that's what we're diving into today
Yeah,
with Robert Greene's The 48 Laws of Power. This book, it's fascinating,
for sure.
but also a little bit ruthless, you know?
Yeah, you could say that.
But don't worry, we're not going to like give you a how-to manual on being Machiavelli or
Yeah.
anything. More like we're unpacking some of these like timeless,
Yeah.
maybe even uncomfortable truths about how power like really works.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes it so relevant even today. I mean, it's called the 48 Laws of Power, and it's about understanding these dynamics, not necessarily saying every single one is something you should do,
Right.
but just recognizing them, I think, is powerful in itself.
Totally. So no togas required for this deep dive.
No togas.
But maybe a healthy dose of skepticism. You mentioned being really interested in how these laws actually play out
Oh, yeah.
in history, but also in like everyday life.
Absolutely.
Well, Law 6, court attention at all cost, kind of throws us right into the circus,
Ah.
literally. Green uses P.T. Barnum
Oh, wow.
as an example,
I love
the
it.
circus guy.
Right. Yeah.
And apparently he was a master of like grabbing the spotlight.
Yeah, and not always in the most uh, truthful ways, right?
Yeah.
Like he knew how to spin a story, even if it meant maybe stretching the truth a little bit to get people interested, you know? And I think there's something to be said for that, right? Like in a world that's so saturated with information, being seen, even if it means being a little bit out there, can be really valuable. Think about it, like our social media feeds, it's all about standing out in this sea of, selfies and whatever everyone's posting.
So it's like that saying, all press is good press.
Right, exactly. Though I'm sure there are cases where that backfires terribly.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's got to be a line. When does like attention seeking become strategic versus just like, I don't know,
Too much. Too much. Yeah.
That is the question, isn't it? When is it strategic? When is it a liability? And Green actually gives us another great example with Law 25. Recreate yourself.
And he talks about George Sand, a woman who took a male pen name to get published in the 19th century. So we're talking back when that was like a really bold move.
Wow. Talk about committing to your personal brand.
Right.
But it makes you wonder, are we all kind of doing that now? Like with our digital selves?
It's an interesting thought, isn't it?
Yeah.
We're all curating our online personas, choosing the right filters for our photos, crafting the perfect tweets.
For sure.
And it really makes you wonder, is there even such a thing as a true self anymore? Or are we all just, like you said, carefully crafting these digital masks?
Okay, now we're getting kind of deep.
Right.
But I see your point. Speaking of strategy, though, it's not just about being seen, right?
Right.
Green also talks about the power of dot silence. Law 4 is always say less than necessary.
Yes.
And he uses Louis XIV, the Sun King himself.
As like the master of this.
Yeah.
Apparently, the guy knew how to work a silent pause.
Oh, imagine being like one of his ministers. Right. You go to him with this whole plan. You're so excited about it. You're pouring your heart out.
Yeah.
And all he says is, I shall see.
Oh my gosh.
Can you imagine? Talk about being left hanging.
Brutal.
But Green argues that this was actually like a power move. By not giving his opinion right away, he kept everyone guessing.
Okay.
Maintained this air of mystery, you know?
That's a power move if I've ever heard one.
Right.
Not sure I could pull it off, though.
It takes practice.
I'm way too much of a talker, but it does make you think, does silence even have that same weight anymore? Because now everybody's got something to say, right? Everyone's got an opinion, a platform. That's a really good question. Has all the noise, has it diminished that power of silence? Or could it be that in a world that's constantly talking, knowing when not to speak is even more powerful?
Ooh, I like that. Like strategic silence?
Right.
That's the ultimate power move.
It's like clearing a room with just a look.
Exactly.
And that actually leads us perfectly into Law 14, which takes this whole observation thing to a whole other level.
Yeah.
Pose as a friend, work as a spy.
Okay, now we're getting into like cloak and dagger territory. But before we, start recruiting our own network of spies,
Right.
what's the message here? Because it feels less literal than that, right?
It's not about like literally spying.
Right.
It's more about, every relationship, every workplace, there's like these unwritten rules,
Totally.
alliances, little power struggles here and there.
Yeah.
And I think what Green's getting at is if you pretend those don't exist,
Right.
that doesn't mean they're not affecting you.
You're not immune just because you're oblivious.
Exactly.
It's kind of like that whole keep your friends close and your enemies closer thing.
Right, exactly.
But maybe less, I don't know, adversarial, More like keep your eyes open, pay attention.
Be aware, right? Like, you don't have to be paranoid, but
Yeah.
being observant, I
Right.
think, can be really helpful.
So not like full-on suspicion, but just a healthy amount of like keeping your ear to the ground.
Yeah, exactly. It's about understanding the motivations of people without necessarily assuming everyone's out to get you. Green's not saying we should all become master manipulators, right?
Right.
But we can be more savvy
Savvy. I like that.
in how we're interacting with people.
So it's less Machiavellian, more just like strategically self-aware.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it. It's about understanding the rules, even if you decide, you know what, I'm going to play by my own rules.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Which I think leads us to another really interesting part of power, which
Yeah.
is the whole emotional side of it.
Oh, absolutely.
How understanding our own emotions, other people's emotions,
Yes.
can be this whole other like power tool.
For sure. And you know what? Green even talks about that in Law 9. Win through your actions, never through argument.
Ooh, I like that.
And he tells this great story about Michelangelo,
Oh, okay.
you know, the guy who sculpted David.
Of course, yeah.
So he's working on this masterpiece,
Yeah.
and one of his patrons, this guy Soderini,
Okay.
is like hovering over him, critiquing everything.
Oh no, the worst.
I know, right?
Yeah.
And Soderini, he gets really fixated on the nose of the sculpture.
Our nose.
Thinks it's too big.
Oh, okay.
And so Michelangelo, he could have argued with him, right? But he's smart.
Yeah.
He knows it's not going to get him anywhere.
Right.
So he does something a little bit clever.
Ooh, what'd he do?
He invites Soderini up onto the scaffolding with him,
Okay.
hands him a chisel, and says, "Here, if you think you can do better,
Oh my gosh.
go for it."
No way.
But here's the thing, right? While Soderini's holding this chisel,
Yeah.
Michelangelo, he like suddenly drops a little marble dust,
Oh, sneaky.
creating this illusion that he's actually chipping away at the stone.
No way. That's amazing. So Soderini's like, oh, I'm making a difference.
Thinks he's won. Thinks he's gotten his way.
But the nose is the same.
Nose is untouched.
That is brilliant.
Right. And it's such a good example of how sometimes, like, actions speak louder than words.
Totally.
Michelangelo could have argued all day.
Oh, yeah.
But by just sidestepping that whole argument and taking action, he gets what he wants.
It's such a good point that it's not always about, like, avoiding conflict.
Right. Exactly.
But more about knowing how to, like, I don't know, navigate it effectively.
Yeah.
When to push, when to, you know.
Exactly.
Sometimes the most persuasive argument isn't even an argument.
Right. It's an action. And sometimes the most powerful action is actually inaction.
Ooh.
That's what Law 36 is all about.
Okay.
Disdain things you cannot have. Ignoring them is the best revenge.
Ignoring something as revenge.
Yeah, it sounds weird, right?
It does feel a little counterintuitive. Don't you usually want to, like, do something
Right.
when someone wrongs you?
It's the natural reaction.
Yeah.
But Green's saying sometimes the best way to get back at someone is to just rise above it.
Just don't even engage.
He gave the example of this writer, Pietro Aretino,
Okay.
who was constantly getting attacked by these other writers.
They're so catty.
I know, right?
Yeah.
But instead of, like, getting into these little fights,
Yeah.
Aretino just ignored them all.
Hey, wait.
Completely.
Wow.
Which actually made him look even stronger, you know?
So it's like, you can't bring me down if I'm already on another level.
Exactly. It's like, by refusing to even acknowledge it,
Yeah.
you keep your dignity, you keep your power,
Right.
and it drives the other person crazy, you know?
Yeah. That's a great point. Sometimes no response is the best response.
Sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously depends on the situation, right?
Right, of course. Yeah.
You don't want to be a doormat.
Right.
But it's about picking your battles,
Right.
knowing when it's actually worth it to engage.
So we've talked about appearances, silence, emotions. What other, like, insights does Green give us on this whole power thing?
You know what I think is really interesting? One of the things he really emphasizes is how power itself
Yeah.
can be kind of dangerous.
Oh, okay.
It's seductive. You
Okay.
can get too much of it.
Right.
You can get isolated by it. And he talks about that in a couple of the laws, like Law 18 and Law 47.
Okay, so what's the danger with Law 18?
So Law 18 is, do not build fortresses to protect yourself.
Oh.
Isolation is dangerous. And it's about how, you know, when we feel threatened,
Yeah.
it's tempting to kind of withdraw.
Oh, totally. Like retreat into your castle.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But what he's saying is that actually makes you more vulnerable.
It's like dividing yourself, you know? A house divided can't stand. But that's like empires and stuff. What about just regular people, how does that apply?
Well, he uses the example of the first emperor of China,
Okay.
who, after he unified China,
Right.
he kind of went into his palace, this massive palace, and basically isolated himself.
Really?
And ultimately, he lost control because he
Wow.
wasn't connected to the people anymore.
Oh, that's a good point.
Right. You
Yeah.
need those connections
Right, yeah.
to actually maintain power.
So it's not about being a hermit.
Exactly.
It's about, like, finding that balance, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, being in the world but not of it.
Right, exactly.
And I think that's really relevant today, right? With social media, it's easy to get caught up in your own little bubble.
Totally.
You have to make that effort to connect with people offline,
That's a good point. What about Law 47? What's the danger there?
Oh, Law 47, that's a big one. It's about knowing when to, quit while you're ahead, not letting ambition run away with you.
Oh, okay, so not getting greedy, basically.
Kind of, but it's more than that.
Yeah.
It's called do not go past the mark you aimed for. In victory, learn when to stop. Green's talking about that point when, like, you've achieved something great.
You're on top of the world.
Exactly. But instead of, enjoying it, you just keep pushing for more. And that's when things can get, well, messy.
Oh, I see. So it's not about, like, limiting your goals. It's about recognizing when you've reached a good stopping point, savoring it, maybe.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He uses the example of Cyrus the Great.
Okay.
Who was this, like, incredible conqueror, right? But he kept going, conquering and
Oh,
conquering.
no.
He got overextended, spread himself too thin, and it ultimately led to his downfall.
Wow. So even someone that powerful can get tripped up by, like, wanting too much.
It's a classic case of too much of a good thing.
Yeah.
And it really makes you think, why is it so hard to just, be content with success? To stop and smell the roses, so to speak.
It's that constant pressure to achieve, right? Like,
Well,
there's always something more to do, more to get.
It's like built into us, isn't it?
Yeah.
That drive. But I think Green's saying true mastery, true power, sometimes it's about recognizing when it's time to, I don't know, take a breath, to consolidate, appreciate what you've accomplished.
That's a good point. It's like finding that sweet spot between ambition and contentment, you know?
Exactly. It's not about losing your drive, but about channeling it in a way that's, ultimately fulfilling and sustainable.
I love that. This whole deep dive has been so fascinating. What I'm taking away is that Green isn't just giving us, like, a rule book for power, but he's really making us think about how these dynamics are working all around us.
Oh, absolutely. He even talks about how sometimes just being aware of these laws
Yeah.
can be enough to protect yourself from, being manipulated.
Ooh, that's a good point. So it's like knowledge is power, or at least knowledge of these laws is power.
Exactly. It's like having this, like, secret decoder ring,
Yeah.
You can see the game being played even when other people don't realize it's happening.
It's like we're all playing chess, but some people don't even know what the pieces are.
And some people are playing checkers and they don't even realize there's a whole other game happening.
Right. So, okay, if we had to distill this down to, like, one key takeaway for our listeners,
Yeah.
what would it be?
Pay attention to everything. We've
Yeah.
talked about emperors, artists, everyday people.
Mm-hmm.
This stuff is happening everywhere.
It's like that saying, the truth is out there. Except in this case, it's more like the power dynamics are out there.
Exactly. And once you start seeing them, you can't unsee them.
Hmm.
So use that awareness wisely.
Love it. Be aware, be strategic, and maybe, just maybe, don't trust anyone who tries to hand you a chisel and a pile of marble dust.
Unless you want your nose shortened.
Exactly. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the 48 Laws of Power. It's a book that'll definitely stay with you.
Oh, for sure.
And hey, if you're feeling extra strategic after this, maybe give a listen to our episode on Sun Tzu's Art of War. We'll be back next week with another deep dive. Until then, stay savvy out there.